はい、皆さんこんにちは。本日は、ご参加いただきありがとうございます。フューチャーエデュの竹村と申します。今日は本当に275名ぐらいの方がですね、全国26都道府県、海外の方も含めてご参加いただいておりまして、とても、この学習者中心の、対話的で深い学びというテーマで、お話をされたいことに大変関心が高いんだなということに嬉しく思っております。で、本日のイベントはですね、私が5年前に始めましたフューチャーエデュ東京に新たにですね加わったメンバーの人たちと、昨年ちょうど1年前から始めました、ブリッジラーニングというですね、学習者中心の学びについて先生方と一緒に共に学ぶっていう、中期型の研修事業のメンバーで運営させていただいております。で、事前にお知らせをしておりますが、クリス先生との通訳の遅延をですね、できるだけ避けたいなということで、1時間でぎゅっと濃い時間にするためにですね、事前に録画した動画の方を最初に皆さんに見ていただこうというふうに思っております。で、こちらを見ていただいた後にですね、クリス先生にご参加をいただいて、逐次通訳を交えながら皆様のご質問などにも積極的に答えていただきたいなというふうに思っておりますので、ぜひ YouTube ライブのコメントを使っていただいて、動画を見られて気になったことなどありましたら、ちょっとすべてお答えできるかどうかわかりませんが、できるだけ努力させていただきたいと思いますので、ご参加いただければというふうに思います。それでは動画の方、スタートをお願いできますでしょうか。Hi, Chris. Thank you for joining our conversation today. Today, as we talked about in the topic for the event, we really like to focus our conversation around dialogical and deep learning. And you have worked on that theme, not just at Millennium School, but also at Argonaut School and throughout your career. So I'm really excited about learning from your experiences today.
Thanks so much, Emmy. I'm really looking forward to talking with you about it.
Thanks. So first of all, I'm hoping that all the audience has read a little bit about all the previous articles about Millennium School. And Millennium School, you can maybe introduce a little bit about it, but it's a private school really focused on the development of middle school children, adolescents from grade 6 to grade 8, and to foster really their personal growth as age appropriately or developmentally appropriately. You're employing this teaching method called Quest, which combines project-based learning and social emotional learning. And I would like you to talk a little bit about how did you come up to design this Quest model, and how does the Quest work, and how is that maybe different from traditional kind of teach to the test type of teaching?
Perfect. I have to start at the beginning, I think, which is, for me, middle school when I was a student was a boring experience. I felt disengaged. I didn't know how to connect socially, and I was unhappy. And I think all of this work comes from this surprising realization that so many people have that experience of being an adolescent in school, to the point where people think maybe that's just how it has to be, that you're supposed to be bored and disengaged and frustrated. And I really think that's not true. And everything about Millennium is to try to show that there are other ways, fundamentally different ways to educate, particularly adolescent students. So Millennium is a laboratory school, and we work with several universities here in the US to try to bring, as you were saying, this developmental research to life, to make it not something just to read about in a study, but classrooms that you can visit, stories that we can tell, what worked as well as what didn't work, so that there's more, experimentation, more opportunity to learn better ways to teach. So what that means is starting off with social emotional learning as the foundation. And I'm sure we'll go more into this, but recognizing that until a child feels a sense of belonging, they can't reach their potential their human potential or their academic potential specifically. And then as you have that base of belonging and safety, you can start to do much deeper formats of learning. So instead of memorization, which the neuroscience is very clear doesn't last for most people, if information is not connected to emotion when we're learning it, we tend to not retain it. It gets deleted because our brains conclude it's not that important. So we bring that social emotional learning focus as we design a project to center our learning around. And that's what a quest is. A 6-week burst of learning, which I'm sure we'll get to say more about.
So the quest incorporates the emotional engagement of students.
Absolutely. It's essential, I think, for the entire school to see that as their foundation. It's not just something that, once in a while we have a special class on that, but actually that's the core method of how we want to relate to each other as humans together. Grown-up humans and growing humans, we all need that emotional safety. Teachers need it too. Sometimes teachers really lack a sense of safety or comfort to be themselves. And we know for any of us, any age, if we want to do our best work, it's going to be something personal to us, something that we're passionate about, that we might have quirky love for. That's where we do our best teaching. That's where we do our best projects as students. So it depends on that emotional safety and the invitation to be your authentic self.
Can I dig a little bit deeper on that very point? Because I think a lot of teachers participating in this conversation are interested in project-based or thematic-based learning to really kind of engage kids in particular topics deeper than just memorizing fact. And how getting kids to be interested in particular topic, for example, I don't know, circular economy or climate change or gender gap issues or whatever it is, how getting kids to be excited about the project theme related to emotional safety and sense of belonging. Can you kind of connect that?
Yeah, so at Millennium, we say there are 3 keys to tap into the motivation of adolescents. First is it has to be personal. It has to help them reflect on their identity because they know they're changing rapidly and they're really curious who they're becoming. Second is it has to be social. They're so motivated to be with their peers, to understand how to be in friendship and relationship in different ways. So whatever question you're tackling, to do it in teams, in groups, in ways that connect with that social drive. And the third key is to connect it to a real world issue. So, they are suspicious of, are they just being kind of babysat, or is the school really preparing them for life? And the simple way to show them that it's real is to connect them with an adult who is objective to them. So not a parent or teacher, who represents struggling with or thinking about this issue in the real world. That person has credibility. And then we as educators and parents can be on the same team as students, helping them create something that impresses these objective adults.
I see. So the personal, social, and real world, these are that kind of triangle that you try to incorporate in designing Quest.
That's right.
And for kids to be deeply engaged into Quest, that the personal piece is really kind of related to the safety, emotional safety aspect of the school that you're creating.
Yes, and really all of them is also the social piece depends on that personal safety that,
Oh, yes, that's true.
If you want to see that it's okay to be me, and it's okay if that me is a little different today than I was yesterday, if I'm trying different identities or different interests, that I won't be shamed or bullied for that, but actually accepted because we're all trying to figure out who we are, even as adults, but especially as adolescents.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And to be able to embrace that sort of, it's okay to be me, and I fully belong to this school or this community. What are some of the methods or the tools are you incorporating into school to make this happen?
The first one, and this is not the easiest one, but I think it's a foundation, is, if we want kids to feel like it's okay to be you, the adults have to feel like it's okay to be me. And that's a tall order. It's not easy to create workplaces that invite that authenticity, but it is possible. So whenever we're helping a school design a new advisory program, for example, the first step is to help the adults have an advisory for themselves. So a council, essentially, where the educators can process, here's what's coming up for me, or here's something I'd like to try. I would love your feedback or support or advice on it. Or I just had a terrible day. Like, I need someone I can talk to and figure out a different strategy. So we first need that supportive group where we can be really honest with each other. And when we feel kind of in our bones what it is to be a member of a group like that, that's the first step to offering it to students. And we know what feel we're looking for. After that, of course, there are a lot of tactics and strategies about a whole set of skills you could simply call facilitation skills, which, unfortunately, I think up to now, most teacher training programs have not offered. Sometimes in Socratic method, you get aspects of this, but a lot of what we're trying to do is bring these facilitation skills from the world of psychology, where they're well-researched and well-documented, into education where we need them, and it can start to give teachers the skills to create honest conversations among students, whether about emotions or an academic topic.
Right. I would like to talk about the teacher among teacher group and the teacher with the student group kind of separately. But first of all, you mentioned that it's important for teachers to feel that they can be themselves, and they have a council or group of advisors that they can feel free to talk to. But is that common to have that group in American school systems? I know it does exist in Millennium, but
no. In a word, no. It's a very special thing when it exists, and it happens sometimes spontaneously without a formal structure, but it's rare to have that be part of the structure, and that's something that I would love to change about school design.
Right. So that's something that you set as a very high goal when you started Millennium, to have that kind of foundational group for every teacher at Millennium School. And how what are some of the tips in creating such a group? I know that there's a whole set of skills, but if teachers at Japanese schools are to start, what are maybe like first 2 or 3 things that they can do?
Yeah. I think it can start off as a community of practice, where we're creating a set of peers, giving some clear structure to it. So maybe once a month or twice a month we meet, creating some boundaries around it. So, for example, confidentiality, to say, in this space, I'd like to be able to speak really honestly, and it would help me to know that my words won't be repeated elsewhere, and seeing if everyone can agree to that. And letting it be then a space, first of all, where you can process all the things that are going through your minds as a teacher that you don't get a chance to talk to someone about. This traditional teaching can be a little isolating, for the adult. So first, a chance to just let some of what's moving around inside you take place outside in a safe space where others are listening well, with the tool to say, I'd like, as I share this, I can let you know, do I want advice? Would I just like you to listen and have empathy? Would I welcome questions? Just a light bit of structure so you're guiding others in how to respond. I think that's the ground zero. And it can go other places. It can become more personal, but first to have honest conversations about what is my experience like in this profession, in this building, and to feel more accompanied by others.
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate to participate your SEL advisory facilitation training last week, 2 weeks ago in San Francisco, and it was quite astonishing to witness how teachers so quickly have become a unified community of practice, although everyone came from different school, a different part of America and things like that. And so I witnessed the power of the community of practice.
It amazes me every time. I always wonder if people will be willing. And then I realize, most adults are waiting for an invitation. We'd like to tell people what's on our minds, but it's hard to know if it's safe or welcome. And when that invitation comes, and it feels like a safe space, most people are willing to at least take one more step towards sharing how they're really feeling.
Right. So now I would like to kind of move on to how that community of practice and having that shared experience could help teachers create this sense of belonging and emotional safety for the kids in their classrooms, and then kind of connect that to a deep learning, the eventual output that we like to see in
Perfect.
kids.
Yeah, so we think of adolescence as going through 3 developmental stages, and lots more than we have time to go into there, but the essence of it is that first, it's about finding belonging. I'll say more about that in a minute. Then it's about achievement and being able to feel like you can get things done and win the game. And then it's about authenticity, which is more bringing yourself into the world. So to help adults think about it and why belonging is so important, imagine, for us as adults, that we're going through a transformation as big as our students. So, imagine that you have just moved to a different country, in a different job, even a different profession. In that transformative space, you would be seeking belonging and just wondering, did I do the right thing? Am I in the right place? And if you're not sure about that, you're going to be stuck there, as that lack of belonging is so threatening. So this is how it is for adolescents. They've started puberty, their minds are growing, their social world is growing. They first need to feel like I'm welcome here, like I'm accepted. I'm not perfect, I'm confused about things, but at least I'm in the right place and this is a safe place. Once they have that sense of belonging, then they can race forward in all kinds of achievement and personal development, but that belonging is first. And so practically speaking, for teachers, it actually is part of our job to help them have good relationships. And that can sound strange, I think, for the way that, traditionally we were all taught to teach, but helping to make sure that they have at least one friendship or a small group where they feel that sense of belonging is one of the single best gifts we could offer them. And it will fuel their academics as well as their happiness. It's one of the reasons why project teams can be so powerful, that when you create a really clear structure for a project team and students can engage side by side, staring at each other can be very scary and create anxiety for all of us, especially students. But when you're side by side working on something together, friendships form. So it's another reason why that project-based learning connects so well with the social emotional.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So in your experience at Millennium School, can you maybe give me an example or two of kids starting at 6th grade, how they sort of, she or he grew from establishing sense of belonging to becoming like, it's okay to be me? And
yeah, definitely. Yeah, thinking of several students come to mind immediately. I think of that feeling in 6th grade of, there's a sense of desperation often that if I don't find a friend, I'm not safe here. I can't even be here, at least psychologically. So I think it starts off often scary. How will I fit in? Will anybody welcome me, or will I be made fun of? Then after, I'm thinking of students now where they find that, I'm thinking of one boy who, found that one friend in 6th grade and they became inseparable. And then you start to see where, belonging can become conformity. And they start to feel like they're almost identical. Am I the same person? We have all the same interests. And at first that feels really good as you feel seen. But the conformity eventually can start to feel like a negative. Like, but I want to be friends with someone who's also different. Those are signs that they're developmentally growing beyond just the belonging phase.
Right.
And then they go into achievement as the next phase, where they're more comfortable being in multiple groups. And something that we as teachers can do is to help students realize you can be a member of more than one group and be a different person in those groups. You might have a sports group where a certain part of you comes out, and a study group where you act in a really different way.
Right.
And that's actually really important and healthy to figure out your identity. And then, as they get further into achievement, at a certain point, many students will say, what's the point of this? Why am I learning this? Is this for grades? Why do I care about grades? Some students have those questions come up in 7th grade. For some, it might not be till college that they start to question the system. But that questioning is also really healthy. It's showing, I see that this is a game. I'm not necessarily saying that I don't want to play it, but I want to know why I should play it. What is the bigger purpose of this than just the game? And that's the sign that the authenticity is starting to come through. They're wondering, who am I and what can I bring through this game that's worth doing? What would be worth my time and energy? And that's a beautiful sign. It's great to be with students when they're in that questioning phase.
That's a very important question. A lot of times kids are not allowed to ask such questions because the trajectory is so linear in a way that you pass this test, then you go to high school, and then you pass this test, and you go to college, and if you want to go into science, these are the subjects you have to study and ace it, that type of kind of trajectory. And it's almost perceived as questioning is a bit of a waste of time. But that, as a result, I have a personal experience as well, but as a result, by not questioning, I ended up losing a deeper interest in learning, because I at that moment, I felt that it was completely just a game. So if I achieve it, there's nothing beyond that stage, because I never had a chance to ask that question. So at Millennium, you have opportunity, or you have permission as teachers, our kids, to ask any questions like that, or?
Definitely. I think if you repress those questions, it just means there'll be a midlife crisis later where they all come out and you're 45 and wondering what happens. That, it's hard to stop development, but it does get delayed in traditional systems, I think, where you're taught that achievement is the highest possible goal.
Right.
Questioning that is pointless. And so you go through until you're into adulthood before you start to gradually wonder, like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, exactly. Wait a minute. Why?
It's like, I worked so hard to get to this college, but now what? Like, I'm supposed to be happy now, but nobody ever showed me how to be happy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why so many kids, when they're junior, senior in college, a lot of times, at least in Japan, they don't know what they want to do. So many of them, at least in my generation, ended up choosing career based on the ranking, corporate ranking, salary ranking, sort of like this external measures that define what good of a place an employer may be, as opposed to, this is what I want to do, this is who I want to work for or work with. And
exactly. The less you know yourself, the more you need to rely on someone else's ranking. And the more you know yourself, the more you navigate the world on your own terms.
So everybody talks about, now Japan used to have a very stable job market, but now with turbulent changes in our global businesses and economy, and from manufacturing to more digital economy and so forth, a lot of people are starting to think that, when kids graduate from college, it's not going to be just one job they would stay with for next 40 years. Kids would have to navigate their own careers. So to do that, they really have to know who they are, what their interests are, what kind of environment they would like to be in so that they can realize their full potential and things like that. And it seems like at Millennium, you're trying to provide kids with such opportunity from middle school age. Is that fair?
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons I love middle school, because it's an age of such transformation. When you start educating in this way, you're kind of catching them right as their world is opening. You know, on average around age 11, when their social world is suddenly coming into focus, you know, that is a transformative time. They're recreating their identity now as social beings, whereas before they weren't aware of the social world as much as an adolescent is. So it's such a good time, you know, to begin this style of education and to help them experiment also and, you know, try many different things, identities, methods of learning, topics of learning, and figure out where their authentic self is. And right next to that authentic self are their greatest gifts. That's where they have something to bring to the world that will really distinguish them.
I would like to switch gear here and to talk a little bit about, so in the school environment, we talked a little bit about safe environment for teachers to have counsel, advisors, and then with that experience, the teachers can bring that similar type of meetings with the kids. And can you talk a little bit about what advisory is traditionally and how you're trying to sort of reimagine advisory such that it could be a forum for kids to really be themselves and have this trusted group of friends?
Perfect. Yeah, there's a big difference between what advisory has been and what I think it could be with a bit of training. So, you know, in the US, the majority of middle and high schools have a period called advisory, often 15 to 30 minutes. And it's also sometimes called homeroom. And usually it's a group with a teacher where they cover administrative announcements, they have some time to work on homework. You know, maybe in some schools there's a bit of social emotional learning in a more formal curriculum. That's how it is now. You know, where school like Millennium and other schools that are going in a new direction are heading is advisory is your place of belonging. It's the consistent group of peers meeting regularly, you know, usually at least once a week, small enough that you really can feel connected. So groups of less than 20, ideally, if possible, closer to 10, different ways that schools can break up classes to let those smaller groups exist. One teacher, and first and foremost, the skill for advisory from the teacher is to make it a safe space. So no one will be made fun of or bullied. You can express what's on your mind as freely as you're comfortable doing. Next skill for teachers is to learn how to invite people to bring more of themselves. As all of us, adolescents or adults, will be a little skeptical and they'll want to test the safety of the space. So one of the key skills is to model as a teacher, sharing a bit more about me as a human, not just me as a professional. So taking at least, you know, one layer of those masks that we all wear off, talking a bit more about our lives. And then I'll just highlight one other skill is we call bridging. And it's the skill to help create connections student to student, not just student to teacher in an advisory. So you can tell if students are always just turning to you as the teacher, they're not yet feeling a sense of a strong group, likely. But when they start to feel comfortable to share directly with each other, to, you know, share some advice or share a story or empathize, now it's starting to be a space that's really connected, where they feel like these are my people, and, you know, my best friends may or may not be in this group, but I know this is a safe space I can keep returning to.
So do you see among the teachers that you work with in the US, like, do you see some of the teachers converting the traditionally advisory classes to something like that you were kind of talking about? Like, how do they transition, like in terms of the student size or the facilitation format and things like that?
Yeah, we've seen lots of different versions of it. Luckily, the time is usually there in the school day, so that's not a battle that we need to fight. Sometimes the group size is too big, though. If it's a classroom of 35 students, then our task would be to subdivide it somehow. See, can we have advisory with half of the class on one day, the other half the next? Teachers creating coverages for each other so that they can each have that gift of time. I think another piece is for teachers, often it becomes the most satisfying part of their work. Like anything, it's scary at first and you wonder if you know how to do it. And as you start to form those bonds with students, it makes it more personal and you become more invested in them as people, not just whether or not they've received your lesson. And I think, for me, certainly, and for many of the teachers I admire the most, this is what gets them up in the morning, the feeling that they have this group that they're guiding.
Yeah, I'm sure it's wonderful to see a deeper connection between kids and the teacher and see more deeper connection among kids as well. But for the teachers who already bought into this idea, I think I saw all the teachers at the training in San Francisco are all really invested into the idea of leveraging advisory as a forum for conversation, deeper dialogues. But are there certain tips that you might have or suggestions for teachers to invite other teachers who may see advisory as sort of like extra work or additional things to do on their plates because their days are usually quite full already?
Yeah, I think the truth is that, there is, if you think of it like a Venn diagram, that the set of people who are great teachers and who are great advisors, there's high overlap, but it's not 100%. So I would always say, if a school is rolling out an SEL advisory program, to not make it mandatory that every teacher become an advisor. Instead, let a pilot group of teachers who are passionate about it carry it forward, build the best version of the program they can, and see how that changes the school culture, because it will have a profound effect. And certain teachers who are maybe waiting on the wings will decide actually they want to try. And at Millennium now, there's kind of an apprentice approach where a younger teacher or someone who's newer to advisory pairs with a more experienced advisor. And that way people are brought into it in a more gentle way.
That makes a lot of sense. I heard similar recommendation about project-based learning as well. Instead of like rolling out project-based learning uniformly at every classroom, when maybe some teachers are more comfortable teaching in the traditional way and not forcing it and letting some examples to flourish and see what happens. It would be better than kind of twisting some people's arms.
Definitely. It's more organic. And, I've watched how the mindfulness and meditation movement has happened in US schools. And I think to the extent it's worked, it's because of that. It's you opt in if you're passionate, it's hard to order someone to do this.
Right. Makes sense. Well, thank you so much. I think there's a lot of potential for advisory type of program to work in Japan as well. And as a last question, before we take this to our live conversation, can you comment just a little bit on how you are helping teachers to become a better facilitator of this advisory program, and what can Japanese teachers also look forward to?
Yeah, this has become a real passion as I was a school leader hiring teachers. It's so hard to find teachers who already have experience in this kind of advisory because it's so new. So I realized we need to create a teacher training program, as many teachers are already so gifted with this, but a little bit of training, tools, and a sense of community, really helps for all of us. So what we're doing now is we've created a training around advisory facilitation with a set of tools and a structured curriculum, but not a scripted curriculum. So it still gives lots of room for, unique conversations to happen, but gives some beginning points. So that is something I'm having so much fun getting to help teachers realize that they are already great facilitators and to practice and feel like they're confident bringing a facilitation mindset both to advisory and then it turns out really to their whole teaching practice.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to carrying our conversation to the live session in a couple of days, but also look forward to working with you for the upcoming SEL advisory facilitation training in Japan as well.
Me too. I'm really looking forward to it and looking forward to learning a lot through it. So thank you so much, Emmy. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. はい、皆さん、ちょっと30分プラスと長い動画だったんですけど、ずっと見ていただいてありがとうございました。これから皆さんとの時間にしたいなと思うんですが、よろしければ、今日ギフトって話もあったかと思うんですが、他の参加者の皆さんと、この今動画30分ぐらい見られて、一番印象に残ったなっていうポイントがありましたら、ぜひこの YouTube のチャットの方でですね、ぜひギフト、皆さんへのギフトとして共有していただけないでしょうか。ぜひ日本ではホームルームとかね、クラスの時間もありますので、アドバイザリーっていう言葉じゃなくても、クリス先生のおっしゃられていたようなことが、教室でも何か導入できるヒントがこの話にあったらいいなというふうに思っております。それでは早速、クリス先生と、あとブリッジラーニング一緒に運営してます、山ちゃんをお呼びしたいと思います。Hi, Chris.
Hi,
Hi, 山ちゃん。
こんにちは。
はい、ここからは皆さんでお話していきたいなと思いますが、first of all, I would like Yama-chan to comment a little bit about the video that he just watched as one of the participants. ちょっと山ちゃんに参加者代表としてまず少しコメントというか感想をお伺いしてみたいなと思います。
はい。フューチャールそしてブリッジラーニングの山崎です。よろしくお願いします。なんかすごい緊張しますね。なんとなくね。いやーでも本当に、Chris, thank you for the wonderful talk. So, いやーもう本当にすごくいいトークでしたというか、まあ本当この長くなってしまってはあれなので、まあ短く一つだけすごく感想としてなんか印象に残ったこと、聞きたいことをお伝えできたらと思うんですけれども、なんかやっぱり、先生自身が、先生たちの間でまずアドバイザリーというか、そういう心理的に安全な環境っていうのができることによって、それがまた子供たちにもつながっていくっていう話がすごく印象に残ったところで、で、その中でちょっと、いや、本当ブリッジラーニングでもなんて言うんでしょう、先生たちで集まって、これはオンラインでやってるんですけど、オンラインでそういうアドバイザリーのような、なんか日々のことについて相談するような時間っていうのをとっているんですが、なんかクリス先生に一個ちょっと聞いてみたいなっていうふうに思ったことは、なんかクリス先生がこれはもしかしたらないのかもしれないんですけど、アドバイザリーがうまくいってるなって思う時ってどんな時なのかなっていうのをすごく聞いてみたいなというふうに思って、なんかオンラインの対話の中で先生たちがいろんなことをシェアしてくれたりしていたんですけど、もしかしたらこれ実際に自分の職員室でやった時に、なんか愚痴大会みたいになっちゃって、これでいいのかなとかいうふうに思っちゃう先生もいらっしゃるかなっていうふうに思うんですね。なので、よろしければそのあたりについてお伺いできたらなというふうに思っております。
Wonderful. Thank you, Tomo. I'm just receiving the translation now. Yeah. So how do you have a sense when advisory is going well? Yeah. The very first thing that comes to mind is by seeing where students are looking. And I think I made some comment to this in the interview that you can tell if they're only referring to you as the adult, that the group is still young in their connectedness. And when they begin referring to each other, because they have a sense of each other's stories, and because they want to react and connect, then the group is evolving in a good way. When they are internalizing some of the tools that you're teaching, in a great advisory, you're teaching students how to reveal a little more about themselves than they normally would, because they have a sense of safety and a structured way to do that. And then you're also teaching how to receive. If someone shares something personal, what do you do? We need to learn that. It's not automatic. So when you see them internalizing those tools, sharing a little more personally and responding to each other with empathy, without your prompting, then something special is happening here. They're learning a way to connect with others that they were always able to, but we don't think of adolescence as being able to because it's not normally taught.
Can I translate now, Chris?
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. 英語で理解できた方も大勢いらっしゃるかもしれないんですが、簡単に、お話伝えますと、アドバイザリーがうまくいってないっていうのをどうやって判断するかということだったんですが、生徒さんとのアドバイザリーの場合はということなんですが、その生徒さんがやっぱり先生にだけ応答しているような時っていうのはやっぱりまだまだ集団として、育ってない、成熟してない段階というふうに判断していいと思うんですが、生徒さんがお互いのことを呼びかけ合ったりとかですね、なんていうか先生に別に言われるからとかじゃなくて自然に反応したりとかですね、共感するコメントをしたりとかっていうので、その生徒さんの間の中で話が対話のキャッチボールっていうのがされていくようになったら、それはグループが成長してきているっていうふうに言えると思うんですが、その対話をですね、促していくための、ツールっていうのもいろいろあるんですけれども、少しそういった動画にもありましたけど、骨組みを入れてあげることで共有するっていうことに対してのスキルアップができたりとか、その共有されたことをどうやって受け止めるのかっていうことに対しても生徒さんたちがスキルアップすることができるかなというふうに思いますというお話です。And Chris, there's one question from Yama-chan about if it's among teacher group, like as a facilitator teacher, is it a similar dynamics that he should be aware of? Or 先生方同士のアドバイザリーの場合だとどうなんですかねというちょっと質問を今追加でしております。
Yeah, and I just saw your note about, if it feels like people are complaining a lot, if that feels too much of the space. One thing we say is that when an advisory is going well, intensely difficult things can happen very close to silly things. And there's a freer interplay between those two. And it's a wonderful sign of health. And if you get stuck in one, only going to the sad or only being silly, then that's a sign that, they're not there yet. They're still building trust. I think most of the same rules apply between the student advisories and teacher advisories. And I'll pause there for translation.
先生方のアドバイザリーの場合にも当てはまることとしては、非常に話すのが難しい、躊躇するようなちょっと深いお話っていうところと、本当にふざけたというか、楽しいお話っていうのが割とスイッチがどんどんできるような関係性っていうのがとても健全な対話の関係性で、どちらかだけふざけてるだけとか、深刻な話をしてるだけっていう状態だと、スタックっていうふうにおっしゃってたんですけれども、ちょっと状態としては良くないかなということでした。はい、
確かに詰まっちゃいそうな感じしますよね。深刻な話ばっかりしてるととか。
逃げ場がなくなるというか、そうですよね。そういうところはありますよね。So from here, perhaps we have about 15 more minutes, so we'd like to incorporate some questions from the audience. But some questions that came earlier from the audience in the registration is they wanted to, she or he wanted to know a little bit more about how to have this kind of deep conversation online. And I know you run online conversation with Argonaut. And can you talk a little bit about how you can actually have these meaningful conversation online?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And when this, pandemic year started, I was really not sure if it could happen online, and I was skeptical. But I've come to feel really pleasantly surprised that the same drive for human connection, the drive that makes us curious about people, especially when we're adolescents, the drive that makes us want to share something and be seen, that still happens in any format. So to me, the main difference is speed. It's kind of like the difference between driving on a regular road and driving on a snowy road. You can still make progress, but you're going to need to go slower. And so with Zoom, the level of trust that you might build in a week or two in person might take a month or two. But it still happens. And this last year, I've been running many different advisory groups that are purely online. And it amazes me how deep they can go. And for certain students, it actually goes better online than in person. So there are some advantages.
Thank you. オンラインでのアドバイザリーを実施について、実はパンデミックというか、コロナの最初の頃は少し会議心があったんですけれども、実際去年かなり実施をしてみてですね、実は同じようにオンライン上で信頼の関係性を作っていくということは可能だっていうふうに確信しているということをおっしゃっています。ただ雪道と、普通の道の違いみたいにおっしゃってたんですけど、やっぱりオンラインで同じような信頼関係とか貴族意識を育むには大体にして時間はかかるっていうことは考えていただいた方がいいかなということで、時によって生徒さんによってオンラインの方が実は深く話をしやすいっていう生徒さんももちろんいるんですけれども、大体往々にしては時間がグループとしてはかかるというふうに思っていただいた方がいいかなというふうに思うということです。ただお子さんですね、別にオンラインでもオフラインでも自分のことを話を聞いてほしいとか何かを共有したいってその気持ち自体にはやっぱり変わりはないので、オンラインもうまく活用していただければというふうに思います。And next is, you talked about the 3 stages, right? The sense of belonging to authenticity. And I think some people are not quite sure what authenticity really means. And can you maybe describe in like a plain word, what kind of, how would you describe a student who is at an authentic stage?
Yeah. So I'm the first student who comes to mind is a student who wanted to wear a tail to school just because she thought it's really cool and creative and different. And she made her own tail, like a cat tail, and wore it to school and didn't care how other people felt. So authenticity is a student who wants to be themselves. They don't care if it seems weird to others. And it's not to harm anyone, but they want to express what they're interested in. They like other people who are also willing to express that. So they kind of trust adults who seem a little quirky or weird, which I'm saying in a good way. I think we're all weird. Just some of us are hiding it and some are revealing it. And they like adults who are revealing their weirdness. And last thing I'll say is, authenticity stage doesn't mean you're deleting the past stages. So you still know how to achieve and you still know how to belong. But you're not doing this just to win someone else's game. So just grades alone are not enough motivation at that stage.
Thank you. 一人生徒さんの具体的な例でお話をすると、ミレニアムスクールの生徒さんで尻尾をつけて学校に通っているお子さんがいらっしゃったんですけど、その子はすごく、かっこよくてクリエイティブなお子さんだったんですけど、他の人がその尻尾をつけてることでどう思うかみたいなことは全く気にしてなくてですね、自分らしくいたいっていうふうに思っている生徒さんだったということで、やっぱりその生徒さんは 自分がどういうことに関心があるのかっていうのをこう自分なりに表現したいっていうふうに思っているんですよね。で、その最初なステージの生徒さんっていうのは、大人の人も本当にこう、なんていうんですかね、もう、真面目で完璧な先生というよりは、少しちょっと変わった奇妙なところがあったりとか、だけたところがある隙のある先生っていうんですかね、の方がちょっとこう信頼できるななんて思ったりすることが多いですということで、で、新章のステージにいるからって、その前の帰属とか達成のステージをこう切り離しているからっていうのではなくて、どちらかというとこの発達っていうのはこう積み重なっているので、もちろん過去のステージっていうのもそのままその子はちゃんとなんていうんですかね、中に持ったまま成長しているっていうところはちゃんとご理解いただければというふうにおっしゃっています。はい。それではちょっと時間も限られているのでどんどん行きましょう。And the related question to this is, so honoring students' interest, of course, is quite important in the context that we are talking about. But when you're running project-based learning, how do you kind of balance honoring each individual interest and running a project as a group?
Yeah, thank you. Such a good question. I think it's really important to understand that offering choice, which is essential, does not mean infinite choice, which actually has real problems and can be overwhelming. So it's choice within parameters. So to give an example, a project might have, a teacher might come in knowing, this project is about exploring physics. They might know in 6 weeks, I want to see students' rockets launch and know what the culmination is, know who the audience will be, but then offer a lot of choice on how we get there. Within a group, what role would you like? And having a rotation of roles is really important in projects. What design would you choose? What process do you have to iterate on your design? Those can be flexible while that overall parameter is set by the teacher.
とてもいい質問をありがとうございますということで、生徒さんにとってもですね、もちろんチョイスがあるっていうのは大切なんですけど、無限にチョイスがあるっていうのも、びっくりしてしまうという、選択のパラドックスっていうところであると思うんですが、で、なので、ミレニアムスクールではその選択、ある一定の枠の中での選択を与えているということで、そのっていうのがどういうことかって申し上げますと、例えばそのプロジェクトが物理のプロジェクトで6週間で最終的には生徒さんがロケットを作って発射させるっていうところを通じて学んでほしいっていうようなことを先生が考えていらっしゃるっていう時に、その、エンドゴールというか最終的な発表とかっていうところに向かって向かう方法っていうのはたくさんある、自由がかなりあることをおっしゃっています。例えばその役割に関して、自由度があって、どんな役割をやるかってことですね。で、その役割も全く毎回同じ役割をやるっていうことではなくて交代してやっていくっていうか、いろんな役割を試してみるっていうのもとても大切です。で、あとどういうデザインをプロセスを作っていくのかとかですね。そういうプロジェクト自体を進行する中でも選択肢とかチョイスっていうのは作ることができるかなというふうにおっしゃっていらっしゃいます。はい。Thank you. And then another related question from that is, there is a student one teacher has who likes to do a project on his own or her own. And is that something that should be honored, or what would be the rationale kind of for stressing working as a project team when someone really wants to do kind of my own theme and on my own?
Yeah, I love that. It's wonderful when students bring that passion. There are a couple ways you could channel it. At Millennium, we have a capstone project that students complete in 8th grade to show all they've learned from 3 years. and that's completely of their own design. So you could have an opportunity like that. I'm thinking of also a wonderful middle school in New York City called The Workshop, where they have something called Genius Hour. And students have an hour every day to work on a passion project, with support, with all the tools, with teachers, but teachers really following student interest. So I don't think you have to jettison the curriculum, but if you can create these other spaces where students can pursue it, or they can suggest for future projects that you can then align with curriculum. So, but it's wonderful when that happens.
はい、生徒さんが一人でやりたいっていうことを、探求する時間っていうのをまた設けることもできるかなということで、ミレニアムさんの場合だと、キャップストーンプロジェクトということで、これもいろんな学校でやられてますけれども、一人個人探求っていう形もありますし、例えばニューヨークにあるワークショップスクールっていうところではジーニアスアワーっていう、個人の興味関心を深掘りする探求っていうのをやってる場合もあります。パッションプロジェクトっていうふうに呼ばれたりもしていますけれども、はい。なので、あと将来的にまた今後やるプロジェクト型学習で、そういった生徒さんの興味関心に合わせていくことで、チームでやるんだけれども、その生徒さんの意向みたいなのが反映されるっていうような、可能性っていうのもあるのかなっていう、ことをおっしゃってました。山ちゃん、私最後聞き逃しちゃったんですけど、なんか他に大丈夫ですか？
大丈夫だと思います。はい。大丈夫だと思います。はい。
すいません。ちょっとマルチタスキングでちょっと若干聞き逃してしまって申し訳ないです。はい。で、あと、じゃあその先生方が、じゃあ実際にプロジェクトをやっていったりするときの、相談グループとしてのアドバイザリーっていうのが今日の動画の大きなテーマだったと思うんですが、Can you talk a little bit about advisory program, among teachers? One teacher is asking, does that just simply mean listening to each other, or is there more?
Yeah. So the heart of advisory is a group that you really trust, where you can be yourself, you can be messy, you can talk about what's on your minds, something to celebrate or something that you need help with. And I think it's safe to say that we all need that of any age. Especially we need it as adolescents because of how much we're changing, but teachers really need it too, in part because teaching can be an isolating profession. We need people to process these things with. And when we have that, we start to know what it feels like to be in a safe group. And that feeling really guides us when we're with students. So one of the reasons to do it is to help practice what we preach and give us guidance for how to do it with students. But I think it's really important to emphasize that it's also for us. And so it's learning how to speak honestly, how to listen, and learning some tools for how to make sense of life. When we are going through overwhelming emotions, adults have them too. What are the tools to handle those? Simply feeling connected to a group is one of those tools. And so that's why one of the reasons it's an essential resource for teachers in schools who, tend to absorb all of the ups and downs of their students, of the stress of the profession. So for all those reasons, I think having the teacher advisory at the center of an advisory program is really, I think, the most powerful way to build it.
Thank you. アドバイザリーっていうのは、動画でもありましたけれども、本当に参加者の皆さんが信頼関係を育めるグループなんですよね。なので、ちょっと時としてはメッシーっていうか散らかるようなこともあるかもしれませんけれども、共に祝うこともあれば、共に悲しむこともあれば、お互いを助け合うようなこともあればっ っていうような、いろいろなことが起きる場かなというふうに思っていますと。で、思春期のお子さんは特に、先生方もそうですけども、思春期のお子さんは特に本当にすごく成長を遂げている時なので、こういった場が必要だというふうに思っていますし、先生方の仕事柄、比較的教室として孤立しがちなところもあるので、こういった場というのはとても大切だというふうに思っています。で、動画にもあったように、やっぱり教えるものっていうのは自らやっぱり体験するっていうことがとても大切なので、やっぱり非常に高ぶった感情みたいなものをどうやってハンドリングするかみたいなツールであったりとか、そういったものも研修とかでご紹介はさせていただいているんですけれども、学んでいくことで、生徒さんも先生もより基礎意識だけではなくて本当に幸せな生活を送れるようになっていくのかなというふうに思っています。というところで気がついたらですね、ちょっとあっという間に時間が経ってしまって、まだちょっとご質問いただいている部分があるかと思うんですが、ちょっと最後に参加者の方からもご質問で、クリス先生の今後の、夢はみたいなことをお伺いしてますので、ぜひお伺いしてみたいなと思います。Hi, Chris. In closing, can you share a little bit about what you're hoping to achieve as a next step for your work in this area?
Thanks for that question. So many things on my mind, but one I've been thinking a lot about is the future of the role of teacher. And I think right now you could divide it into three parts, teaching into three parts. There are things that can be done well by technology, online and automated. There are parts of teaching that can be done by someone with a lower level of skill, the care and general supervision of kids. And the third part is the part of teaching that requires a passionate and determined teacher who's part of a community. And to me, that's the most exciting. And thinking about school design broadly, how do we help those other two parts, what can be done by technology and what can be done with lower skilled members of the team, be done separately so that teachers can do the highest possible, most important human-to-human work there is to do. Of course, I think advisory is central to that. Deeper teaching, deeper learning, dialogic learning, that's, I hope, the future of teaching. And if we can design schools and use technology to support it, all of us as teachers get to elevate our role. So I'll close on that.
Thank you. 本当にたくさんこれからやりたいことはあるんですけれども、先生の役割のなんていうんですかね、新たなあり方みたいなものをもっと考えていきたいと思っていらっしゃるそうです。で、先生のその役割っていうのは3つあるというふうに考えているというふうにおっしゃられていて、で1つ目がテクノロジーを使ってできることっていうところと、2つ目は比較的高いスキルでなくてもできることっていうのと、3つ目がこのアドバイザリーにもつながるんですけれども、先生方が本当に情熱とか強い意志を持ってですね、実践コミュニティの皆さんと一緒に人と人の関係の中で対話的な学び、深い学びっていうものを推進していくっていうところで、クリス先生は3つ目のところに最も関心が高いということなんですけれども、より先生方がこの3つ目のところに注力できるようにクリス先生としてもいろいろサポートされていきたいというふうにおっしゃっていました。はい。それではちょっと5分時間オーバーしましたが、最後まで、今も145人ぐらいの方に来ていただいておりますが、本当に大勢の方にご参加いただいてありがとうございます。ちょっとすべての質問にお答えできなくて、申し訳なかったんですが、またブログなどで少しご紹介できるようなところっていうのは、していこうかなというふうに思っておりますし、今日のお話でアドバイザリーとかクエストという、プロジェクト型学習 プラス SEL というところにご関心ある方は、ぜひ8月末に3日間の研修を予定しておりますので、遊びに来ていただければというふうに思います。改めてこちらメールの方でもお礼と一緒に少しご案内させていただきたいと思いますが、ぜひご興味のある方はご参加いただきまして、こちらご参加いただいた方はですね、その後続く実践コミュニティというものにもご参加いただけることになって、オプションでなんですけれども、ご参加いただけますので、またご検討ください。それでは今日は本当に皆さん、ご参加ありがとうございました。Thank you so much, Chris, for coming and joining us. And
Thank you so much.
Look forward to see you again soon.
Wonderful. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
失礼いたします。